Sveiki, ar žinote, kodėl ryte nepatartina iš karto gerti kavos, arba kas sudaro Žemės branduolį ir ar visata turi pabaigą? Su mumis šiandien ir vėl yra nuostabusis dr. Karl, kuris pasiruošęs moksliškai atsakyti net į pačius netikėčiausius klausimus, kuriuos mums atsiuntėte. Nieko nelaukusi, pristatau dr. Karl. Hey Karl, it's so lovely to have you back in Vilnius and it's not as cold anymore as it was the last time we were speaking.
How cold is it where you are now?
I think it's over plus 10 today. It's way better than the last time, because the last time it was so cold.
Well, behind me I've got some footage that I shot on one of my trips to Antarctica. I've been there 5 times, and this footage I shot at midnight. So behind me you see the bow of the ship. I'll just move out of the way, and over there you can see the bow of the ship, and it's just about to run into some ice. Clunk, 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 clunk. And so all of this is at midnight, when it was just dead flat, and everybody else was asleep on the ship except for the captain and the crew. And I figured I can always sleep when I'm dead, so I may as well enjoy this unique opportunity to see it just dead quiet in the Antarctic. We're up around 65 degrees from the equator.
Wow, that sounds super interesting. And talking about interesting things, you have just published a new book, and you've already published 47 books, and it's really mind-blowing. What is it about, and why do you like it personally?
Well, this one here is my 47th book. It's quite skinny. 15,000 words. I went to a lot of trouble to shrink it from 200,000 words down to 15, so you could read it in an afternoon. Dr. Karl's little book of climate change science, and it's in 5 parts. Part number 1, we started doing research into climate maybe in the 1600s with the Medici family, taking measurements across Europe, and then we kept on going, and surprisingly, much of the really good research was done by the fossil fuel companies in the 1970s and 80s. And by the time we get to the early 1990s, the scientists said global warming is real and we are causing it. And at the same time, the fossil fuels did a complete shift in the other direction and started denying the science of climate change, which they've been doing for the last 30 years at up to $1 billion a year. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 in the book, why do we burn fossil fuels? Because they are incredibly rich in energy. How much? 1 barrel of oil, worth about $50, has the energy of a strong labourer working every day for 10 years.
Wow.
So that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of energy. Number 3, where does the heat from global warming come from? Not from the burning of the fossil fuels, but from the gases like carbon dioxide, which act like a one-way valve. By the way, there's a happy ending. They act like a one-way valve. They let the heat in, but not out. They let the heat in from the sun, but not out, and they trap heat each day. How much? 400,000 Hiroshima bombs worth of heat is what they trap every single day. You can do that for a day or a week or a month or a year or even a decade, but not several decades. Number 4, what's been happening with regard to global warming? What have we caused? Many things, including tipping the Earth off its axis a tiny bit. And number 5, the good news, we can stop and reverse global warming, but the only thing stopping us is point number 1, the $1 billion a year spent on telling lies by the big fossil fuel companies. There you are, you got the whole book in a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so we should read the book and know more about the climate change and what we can do to change it, right? To stop it and to reverse the what's happening at the moment.
All we have to do is get different politicians that will do it. A good example is the ozone hole that came to a peak around the 1980s. By 1985, after decades of research, the scientists said that the ozone was thinning, was getting damaged, and was being caused by chemicals called CFCs. They said this in 1985. Within 2 years, the governments of the whole world got together and banned those chemicals. And so the ozone layer has been healing itself. In 1990, the scientists said global warming is being caused by fossil fuel companies dumping carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and everything else, putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we did nothing because of that $1 billion a year. Now, you're probably thinking that this is sort of hard to believe, that somebody like a fossil fuel company would try to damage something for their own benefit. But here's an example. In August, in 2018, in every hospital in Australia appeared posters put up by the alcohol companies. And the posters show big posters, huge, and they showed the belly of a pregnant woman. And on top of it, it said, it is not known if drinking alcohol by a pregnant woman will damage the unborn baby. That is a complete lie. We've known that that's a lie for decades, 20 years easily. And were the alcohol companies trying to create a big increase in mentally retarded, malformed babies? No, they just wanted to sell alcohol. And there were these people called pregnant women who would not drink alcohol, and that was cutting into their business. So they decided to tell them lies. Nothing personal, it was just business. So we need to go to the top and get different politicians to make the world a better place for you and your children and nieces and everybody else. And we can do it. We have the science and technology.
Hopefully.
We just need the different politicians.
And talking about children and babies, as we discussed prior to the show, I said we have a lot of questions sent in by our audience, and this is one of the questions. What is the scientific consensus of when a woman gets pregnant? When does the life begin? Because, well, we hear a lot of debates about it, but mostly coming from politicians, religious groups, well, not scientists. But what does science know about that?
There are many ways to define life, and the straight answer is we don't know. It's more of a social definition rather than a biological definition. So is a little tiny seed that one day will grow into a giant tree, is that seed alive? Yes. No. Given the right conditions, can it turn into a giant tree? Yes. So it's part of the life cycle. So when can a baby survive by themselves without any help once they've been born? 40 weeks, 35, 30. But is the heart beating before that? Yes. So then you run into all sorts of society and religious definitions which are different from the biological definition. The biological definition, we don't know. We still don't have a definition of is a virus alive or dead. So babies are even harder. Definitely at some stage they're not alive, and at some other stage they are. And in between is very messy depending on your culture and your religion and your family beliefs.
Talking about things that are hard to define, do we know how big the universe is?
Well, this one hurts my head. Yes, we do. The universe is infinite. It just goes on forever. But, and this is the bit that bothers me, Dr. Gowda, the universe had a definite beginning about 13.8 billion years ago. So how can something that had a definite beginning have an infinite size? The clever people in physics tell me that that is the case. They also tell me that the universe would be very, very small if it had not gone through a period called inflation. Now, if you see my little book here, there's the letter I on the cover, and there's a dot on the letter I. And today, the entire universe would be smaller than that dot if it had not gone through what is called inflation. Look it up on Wikipedia, inflation. And what that means is that about 1 trillionth of 1 trillionth of 1 trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, the universe started expanding at thousands of times faster than the speed of light. And it did that for a very short time and then slowed down again. So how big is the universe? Infinite. How big is the universe that we will ever be able to see? That's much smaller. 43 billion light years to the edge. Mm-hmm. And that's because the universe is still expanding, but at a much slower rate. If the universe was not expanding, it'd be much less, but it is expanding. So 43 billion light years to the edge of what they call the observable universe. But then there's a different universe called the reachable universe. And here's something weird. If we could accelerate at 1g, in other words, accelerate so you feel the force of the Earth just on you, we could get anywhere in the universe, the observable universe, 43 billion light years away, we could get anywhere in the universe within a human lifetime.
Wow.
Because as you go faster and faster, time slows down. So you could get to the edge of the universe in maybe 30 years, 40 years of your time on the ship. But on the ship, the clocks are going very slow. Back on Earth, well, Earth would have been gone by then because it would have been something like 14 billion years of time on Earth, and the Earth will get swallowed up by the sun in only 5 billion years. It's quite awesome when you go into astronomy and start dealing with big numbers and big concepts.
As Carl Sagan said, that astronomy is a humbling experience, so it's really humbling to hear those massive numbers and distances and so on. And now something easier to understand, hopefully, it's a question regarding nutrition. Are eggs healthy for you?
They were thought to be very healthy, and then they were thought to be unhealthy, and now the latest thinking is that they are thought to be healthy in moderation. Not a dozen eggs a day, but 1 or 2 eggs a day is perfectly fine. And dietetics is a tricky field. It has been said that the time it takes for something to be proven wrong is about 10 years in dietetics. And they do keep on changing their opinions, but we are sort of oscillating this way and that, getting closer and closer. So at the moment, we're fairly confident that eggs are good for you. They have fats and proteins and carbohydrates, and all in a lovely mix. And what I find absolutely amazing is that if you have a fertilized chicken egg, the yellow bit and the white bit can turn into an animal with 2 legs and 2 wings and feathers and a beak. How does it do that? Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is. And now going back to nutrition again, why should you not drink coffee first time in the morning, and why should you wait for at least 2 hours?
Because it's wasted. It's kind of like throwing a few matches onto a big fire. So firstly, coffee. Now, here's a question for you without any warning, Dr. Goda.
Yeah.
Do you, or have you, or do you know anybody who has ever said, I think I will give up coffee to try to get healthy? Have you heard anybody say that?
Many times. I think I said it many times as well.
Wrong.
Really?
No. Yeah. Coffee, and that includes a whole bunch of chemicals, including caffeine. Coffee as a drink, even decaffeinated coffee, will improve your life expectancy. It will improve your outcome if you have heart disease, liver disease, prostate cancer, cancers of the skin and mouth, and type 2 diabetes.
Oh,
But
yeah.
all of these results have been gathered not by the proper, best, high-quality studies, which are called double-blind controlled, where, for example, you would get a whole bunch of twins who are living identical lives. And then one of the twins will drink coffee and the other one will not, and then you see what happens after 40 years. You can't do that. So we don't do that. What we do are what are called observational studies, where we observe, where we look. And a typical study would be the American nurses study, where you look at 1/3 of a million nurses for 1/3 of a century. And if they're overweight, they die sooner. If they smoke cigarettes, they die sooner. If they have a happy family life, they live longer. If they have friends, they live longer. If they're wealthy, they live longer. So all of these slowly bubble to the surface, but remember, they're only observed, not proven. So it's only correlation. So firstly, in general, 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day is good for you, maybe 4. But in some people, it makes their heart
Pound faster, yeah.
Yeah. It's called fibrillation. So instead of the heart muscles squeezing beautifully and pushing the blood out, instead, one of the chambers in the heart, the atria at the top, they just quiver like a bag of worms, and they don't push the blood very effectively, and that can be very dangerous. That was the case with my wife, in fact. We were driving across New Zealand, and my wife said, "Honey, I think I am in atrial fibrillation." And I said, "Nah." She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Let me feel." So I reached across, I put my hand, my fingers, onto her carotid artery while I was driving, and I said, "Honey, you're in atrial fibrillation." She said, "Yes, I told you that." And the way she gets around that is by just having half a cup of coffee each time. And that's enough. So then finally, why should you not have coffee straight away? You can. It doesn't hurt or harm you generally, but it's being wasted. You see, caffeine is not a straight, direct stimulant. Amphetamines are a stimulant. Thyroid hormone is a stimulant. But caffeine is not a stimulant directly. What caffeine does is block a drug that makes you sleepy. By a drug, I mean a natural chemical in your body. Now, have you done biology and have you heard of adenosine?
Yes, but yeah, you should remind us, just, trigger our memories.
So, on the DNA ladder of life, well, it looks like a ladder with 2 side rails, and it's roughly the same length as the ladder you have at home, a few meters long, but instead of having a dozen rungs, it's got 3 billion. And there are 4 different types, A, T, C, and G. And A stands for adenosine, which is very close to adenosine. There's also the energy chemical in your body called adenosine, so it's a very common chemical in the body. And in one form, it acts like a depressant. And it is blocked by caffeine. So when you wake up in the morning, your levels of adenosine are very low. And if you block it, no big deal. But if you wait for 2 hours, they get higher and higher and higher. And then you have the caffeine, and that blocks the adenosine from waking up and stops you from being sleepy. But on the other hand, maybe we should have a sleep. Maybe we should have a little nap in the morning with a little lunch, and then a little nap in the afternoon, and maybe even a nap in the middle of the day instead of working all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe the evil companies have forced us to have coffee to keep us working.
I totally agree. I would have naps all day if it was up to me, honestly. Tęsinys kitą savaitę.